One white man once said, whoever created this world had a wicked sense of humor. And I couldn't agree with him more, because if we're honest enough, we would admit that we live in a world where evil dominates good. And also, if we were enlightened rather than educated, because education comes from government, and the word government means mind control, meaning we are brainwashed into being workers who wouldn't see beyond the fact that they exist within a virtual reality. Because if we were to see that, we'd suddenly realize that all the governments of this world have no power whatsoever, and that they're nothing more than a mischief, and they've created laws in order to prevent us from learning natural laws. And with these natural laws, we could finally evolve by igniting our 10 DNA strands and growing in consciousness until we can escape this virtual reality. But whites are not foolish. They are the ones who have created the social system that we live under. In other words, when we talk about governments, we're talking about white man's invention. Not necessarily an invention because they received this knowledge, but we are talking about a system which they prefer and imposed upon us due to the fact that they do not have functional pineal glands, meaning they have no citizenship beyond this physical existence. And to say the least, we exist within a thought, because we can all agree that all reality is a construct of consciousness, meaning that every event is a product of the mind. Either you plan it prior or you're observing it with your mind, and thus you will have the ability to remember it, meaning that nothing is beyond intelligence. And so with that being said, consciousness invented itself. In other words, it imagined itself into existence, and it gave itself two distinct personalities, and those became masculine figures, a man and a man. In other words, a father and a son, one being the sender and the other one being the messenger. So the reason for this is because if God or the consciousness had decided to become a male and a female instantly, it would mean that the two would be balancing energies. In such a manner, evil will not be possible, because for evil to exist, there must be conflict. In other words, evil is a manifestation of the number 2. And 2, we all know that is the number of complements as well as opposites. So in the case of evil, it takes a daring personality to experiment with evil, and that would be a masculine figure. And also we can agree that we live in a world where women often complain, and there's even a movement called gender-based violence and the Black Lives Matter movement. All these, together with the evils of this world, such as the military, poverty, inequality, racism, etc. All these are forms of violence. They are due to the fact that our world was designed by masculine figures, the white men, capitalizing on the creation of a masculine God. And so in the movie The Matrix, Keanu Reeves played the character of Neo. And this Neo, in one scene, meets a guy named Morpheus, played by Lawrence Fishburne. And Morpheus tries to tell Neo that it would be practical or close to impossible for him to liberate everyone from the Matrix, because people have been indoctrinated into believing that they depend on the Matrix for survival. So much that their careers as doctors, lawyers, etc. depend on the Matrix. The average person has been to school and has been conditioned to depend onto this world. But unfortunately, every idea or every vision or thought must finally come to an end. Or one would simply say that everything has a beginning and an end, including God himself must transform from one entity or dimension to the next. And so Morpheus tries to explain this to Neo, that it would be impractical or impossible for him to liberate everyone from the Matrix, because people would fight to defend the Matrix, because they don't know any better. Furthermore, the name Neo means one, meaning that Neo is supposed to be the one who created the Matrix. And so the point of this conversation is to say that all the means which we have been accustomed to, which were designed to solve our problems, such as politics, economics, etc., will never really change anything, because they all ignore the reality of our existence, that we are intelligent beings locked inside an intelligent being, meaning that we are nothing but thoughts which have no free will, because for reality to exist, it must be planned from start to finish, and that with this plan, there's usually nothing left for free will, meaning that everything will be carried out as it was planned. But God, being infinite in power and imagination, decided that every reality must have infinite variations, meaning that there are eternal universes which are parallel to this one. In any given second, we have the means to escape this dimension or universe to the parallel one. meaning that we can never actually create free will or have free will or choice, but we can deviate from one perspective to the next. But all of them will still be aligned to the basic principle as to why that dimension was created in the first place. And so, for us to finally transform our DNA, we'll have to finally end fear. And for that to happen, is for the God who designed this matrix to finally imagine himself into his own mind and thus appear. When this becomes a reality and that this God is finally assassinated because he has to challenge the powers that be, when that finally becomes a reality and is assassinated, the world as we know it would shrink, in other words, would change, either due to an explosion or any kind of catastrophic disaster. Because the ultimate idea behind our existence, or the solution behind it all, is that the God who proposed this reality, being a duality himself, of having a light body as well as a physical body, and that we human beings took the physical body, which has a limited uh, time allocation. Furthermore, to say the least, we would say that no imperfect beings can coexist simultaneously and in harmony, meaning that we cannot be perfect human beings and expect sanity and morality to dominate our lives. The only way to solve our problems is for us to ascend in consciousness. And because we don't know how to change this dimension, it will be necessary for that God to propose it, to ascend and thus be assassinated by him challenging the powers that be. And in his resurrection will thus end our fears of death, because fear deteriorates DNA. DNA contains information, meaning that with fear, we are unable to track the information that is in our genes. But given that we live in a world where love dominates and we no longer fear death, this means that all the information that was gathered from our ancestors prior to our existence in all generations will be available to us, thus allowing us to evolve with no end by igniting the 10 domain DNA strands and thus opening realities which are concealed to us, and thus escape this physical world with all its miseries and problems. And that's the purpose of this film. And I thank you for your time. I hope you enjoyed this video, and you can subscribe to as many of my videos as we continue to grow spiritually and otherwise. Thank you for your time.